All right, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on our program today, Africa Discourse on Independent Television. My name is Evans Unokogie. Today on the show, we're going to be looking at 1884 and, of course, 1885. We're talking about 140 years ago. Yes, we're talking about the Berlin Conference, a conference that brought together about 14, 15 superpowers of the world, nations in Europe, bringing them together to decide the political and, of course, all that it has to do with Africa. And it seems that's what the continent Africa is suffering for today. We're talking about the Berlin Conference and, of course, the impacts it has always had on Africa since 1884 and 1885. If you put that together now, it's about 140 years, because that conference actually was between November 1884 and, of course, February 1885. So 140 years ago that that conference has been. Well, to discuss all this today, looking at the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885, we're so privileged to have two gentlemen. And of course, we've got one here, Professor of Vocational and Technical Education, and of course, a lecturer with the University of Benin, Professor Victor Igbenedion. So welcome to the program Africa Discourse.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And also, too, we have Derek Unwango, who is joining us virtually. And when we have him, you're going to be seeing him so that he also bear his mind on some of the issues that we're going to be looking at today. Now, Prof, we're talking about a conference that ended on the 26th of February 1885. So you put that together now over 140 years ago. And as we know, the conference, was the coming together of about 14 countries, namely Austria, Hungary, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, Netherlands, Portugal, Russia, Spain, Sweden, and Norway, Turkey, and of course the United States of America. So that's a conference like what some people may want to describe it as. It was actually the very first siege that Europe laid on Africa as a continent. I don't know how you may want to react, to this, way about looking at the Berlin Conference.
Okay. The conference, as you said, was between 1844 to 1845. And the European powers, they gathered together to hold that conference in Berlin under the organization of the first German Chancellor, Otto von Bismarck. And the idea was that they wanted an organized way to colonize Africa. Before then, they were doing it at random. Every country would want to have a piece of Africa. So they now said, let us have an organized front of dealing with these Africans by putting some regulations in place in terms of colonization and trade. Okay? And significantly, they were more interested in the Congo River and the Niger River, where they have to do their trade. So they have to put certain acts in motion. That was the beginning. Before now, we had about what they call the scramble for Africa. People were rushing, these Europeans, they were rushing here to take their piece, in an organized manner. And they were plundering the wealth, just like you make allusion to at the beginning. They were plundering the wealth of the Africans. They had the notion that these are very primitive people, and that they have to put some civilization to the Africans. But beneath all these ones, it was the resource of Africa that they wanted. And so, if they didn't put some order, there will be trouble amongst themselves. So they have to have that Berlin Conference and put some order, some regulations about the colonization and the trade that they were more interested in for the resources of the continent. So that is the main purpose of the Berlin Conference.
Okay. We have Derek Huango already here. Now, Derek Huango, good afternoon. Nice to be with you on the program.
A very good afternoon. Nice to be on the program. Yeah, thank you.
I know you hold passionate to this topic we're talking about now, talking about how European, made incursions into the continent of Africa. Now, they came, with the pretense of trying to civilize us, but little did we know as a group of people there, as Africans then, that it was our own natural resources that was their major target. So how would you want to react to this conference 140 years after?
Well, first of all, let me commend the European leaders who were able to get their acts together with an attempt to plundering a continent that wasn't theirs, so that in turn they can better the lives of the people of their continent, the people that they are leading. As at the time the Europeans were doing this, most African leaders, you know, it was a monarchical system that was mostly in place in every part of Africa. Most African leaders were being, displaying a lot of pride and arrogance, thinking they were too much to have any form of relationship with any other part of Africa. We were largely not united. We hardly had anything in common with our fellow, black neighbors. Even at some point where we had to trade with our neighbors, we did it with a lot of suspicion. But you see, the Benin Empire was among the very first black folks to, have contact with the, Europeans who were already dealing with the Portuguese as at then, trading, several items via the barter system of trade. We had weapons, we had ammunition, we were already conquering vastly the western part of Nigeria and even some other eastern parts of Nigeria. But we failed to implement what the Europeans are implementing, what the Europeans implemented, which was conquering a place and making sure that that place that has been conquered is saddled with the responsibility of learning their culture, their language, and their form of civilization. We conquered a lot of empire, conquered the conquered, up to Benin Republic. But are you aware that the Benin Empire forbid a Benin man, to speak Benin to any other person who is not a Benin person? That should be a story for another day. Benin ought to be as big as the Hausa land today by territory. But we are not interested in expanding by way of cultural exchange. We were more interested in tribute. Having said that, the Europeans who have been genuinely implemented what I usually call proactive vision, which is the beginning of strategic wisdom. Are you aware that even after that Berlin conference in 1880, that ended in 1885, February 26th, that it wasn't as if the results started coming out immediately. It was like 25 years later that the results of that Berlin conference, that they started achieving it. Unlike our leaders who are only interested in na. We talk about reincarnation. I believe it is the Western people that understand the concept of reincarnation, the concept of continuum in livelihood, in living, in life of its people. They've always had plans for hundreds of years. I think we have a lot to learn from these Western people. They came, they conquered us mentally, they conquered us physically, to the extent that, are you aware that today, an average individual will be ashamed because he or she cannot speak English. The Europeans conquered Africa just the way they conquered the Chinese and Indians. The Chinese who were conquered did not end up embracing the culture of the white man. No, they only embraced the technological aspect of the Europeans. And they threw away their culture, they threw away their language. They taught their people technology in Mandarin, in the case of the Chinese people. And the Indians taught their people technology in Indian language. And they still have their dress code, their traditional wears. But today we are wearing the Western clothes. And we are embracing the Western culture.
Yeah, Derek, let me pause you so that I know you are so loaded, so you have a lot of time, and of course enough time to, really draw that kind of long chronicle into what really happened there. But let's quickly see this video because to further let our viewers understand what we're talking about this afternoon, we made a video so that you can actually see, what happened, 140 years ago in Africa. Please take a look.
In the late 19th century, European powers were in a fierce scramble for control over the vast and resource-rich continent of Africa. This era, known as the Scramble for Africa, saw European nations vying to expand their empires by claiming African territories. The culmination of this imperialist competition was the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885, a meeting that would shape the future of Africa in profound and often devastating ways. Remarkably, not a single African representative was invited to the table where the fate of their lands and people was decided. Background: the Scramble for Africa. By the late 1800s, European nations were competing for influence and resources across the globe. Africa, with its vast mineral wealth, fertile lands, and strategic locations, became a primary target for colonial expansion. Prior to the Berlin Conference, European incursions into Africa were mostly limited to coastal trading posts and a few isolated settlements. However, as technological advancements made inland exploration more feasible, the race to claim African territories intensified. This unregulated competition led to conflicts between European powers, as well as brutal exploitation and violence against African communities. To avoid direct military confrontations among themselves and to formalize their claims, the European powers sought to establish rules for the colonization of Africa. The Berlin Conference, dividing a continent. In November 1884, representatives from 14 European countries and the United States gathered in Berlin at the invitation of German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. The purpose of the conference was to regulate European colonization and trade in Africa. Over the course of several months, these diplomats and leaders carved up the African continent into territories that would be controlled by the various European powers. The key decisions made at the Berlin Conference included principle of effective occupation. European powers were required to establish authority in the areas they claimed. This meant building infrastructure, establishing administration, and maintaining a military presence. Free trade zones. The Congo Basin and Niger River regions were designated as free trade zones where all European nations could operate without interference. The Congo Free State. King Leopold II of Belgium was granted personal control over the Congo Free State, a decision that would lead to one of the most brutal regimes in colonial history. As a result of the conference, borders were drawn with little regard for the existing ethnic, cultural, and linguistic divisions among African peoples. Entire communities were split between different colonial powers, while rival groups were forced together under artificial borders. The European powers prioritized their own economic and political interests, disregarding the complex social and political landscapes of the African continent. The absence of African voices. One of the most glaring injustices of the Berlin Conference was the complete exclusion of African representatives. The decisions made during the conference were based entirely on European perspectives, with no consideration for the wishes or rights of the African people. The conference essentially legitimized the theft of African land and resources, setting the stage for decades of exploitation and oppression. African leaders and communities were left to deal with the consequences of decisions made thousands of miles away, with no say in the process. The arbitrary borders drawn by the European powers would lead to numerous conflicts and tensions in the following decades, many of which continue to affect Africa today. Aftermath and legacy. The Berlin Conference had a profound and lasting impact in Africa. By 1914, nearly 90% of the continent was under European control. The arbitrary borders and colonial administrations imposed by the European powers disrupted traditional societies, economies, and governance structures. The legacy of these borders can still be seen in the modern map of Africa, where many of the political boundaries established during the Berlin Conference remain in place. The exploitation of Africa's resources and people during the colonial period led to immense suffering and stunted the continent's development. The Berlin Conference is often cited as a symbol of the injustices of colonialism and the destructive impact of European imperialism on Africa. A continent divided. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 stands as a stark reminder of the power dynamics that have shaped global history. The division of Africa, without the presence of a single African voice, illustrates the deep disregard for the sovereignty and humanity of African peoples by the European powers. The conference set the stage for decades of colonization, exploitation, and conflict, the effects of which are still felt across Africa today. The story of the Berlin Conference is not just a historical event. It is a crucial chapter in understanding the complex legacies of colonialism and the ongoing struggles for self-determination, justice, and unity in Africa.
All right, thank you so much. So that's the simple story of what we are looking at today, talking about the Berlin Conference of 1884 and, of course, 1885, 140 years after. And we, as a continent, are probably still going through the effects of that conference. And I still have the two gentlemen with us. I've got Professor Victor Igbenedion here with us. Now, Prof, and also Derek Huang, who is arrived at joining us virtually. Now, Prof, I don't know, how do we begin to react? Because like what we're trying to position a while ago, that initially the Europeans said that their intent of coming to the continent of Africa was to civilize the continent. And of course, we saw when that conference eventually came on, not a single African, not even a single African nation was represented at that conference. You want to take it up from there?
Yes. It was a ruse, by the European powers. As I said earlier, if they didn't put order to the plundering of the African resources, there will be war among themselves. So they had to hold that conference to put order, in a way to regulate the colonization and the trade. We were talking about free trade, in the Congo and in the Niger River Delta. So what irks me most is that they never had any consideration for the people who were living there. As you have rightly observed, they didn't bother to include the natives of Africa in the conference. That shows a very disregard for the people who own the continent. And we cannot just assume that we, as one was making allusion to, we had our own intelligence. We were able to manage ourselves, but because of their exploitative tendency, they disregarded whatever we had. And they now sort of applied the principles of assimilation That's what he was saying. Say the Benin people, the Benin Empire, they were just conquering. They did not assimilate the people they conquered, and that's the most dangerous part. You can see the French colonies. There's nothing that they do now without making reference to France. Okay, the English we speak.
Yeah, but that seems to be changing recently. I mean, with the recent happenings in
Yes,
how
long has it taken now? So, what the significant aspect I want to make is that they so colonized us to the extent that they made us, what I want to call dependency syndrome. That everything you think you don't even you think that if you don't make reference to them, there's nothing that you can do on your own.
Okay, let me pause you. Derek Huango, I know you are so passionate when you talked about, you were trying to make allusion to the Beninese, that they were only interested in conquering and not really assimilating their subject that they conquered. Now, from the look of things, it appears that the African society had a very fragmented lifestyle. In other words, they had a very loose lifestyle. I mean, that made it very possible and very easy for these Europeans to come in and, of course, come into Africa. You want to take it up from there?
Yes, check this out. Even the Bible agrees to the fact that the act of man is sinful and desperately wicked. Nobody will be nice to you except they have something they want to gain from you. The Europeans also had their fair share of suffering in the past. Remember that the Mongolian Empire plundered the whole of Europe and even parts of Africa, Asia, including China and India. They plundered them. The Mongolian Empire was also operating like the Benin Empire. They were only interested in what they can get. They plundered for tributes, and that was about all what they were interested in. They plunder a place, get all what is valuable in there, and put an administrator there with the sole purpose of collecting tribute from the people who have been conquered. They did not try to, teach them their language, their culture, or any form of their civilization. But where is the Mongolian Empire today? It's nowhere to be found. The Europeans, like I said, I praise their ingenuity, the way they were able to come together to systematically plan how to plunder, exploit, destabilize African nation. I think that concept is worthy of studying. When you look at the way they did it, till today we are still we are still enslaved. So they say that we are ashamed to speak our language. So we must commend them, and at the same time, while commending them, to also know that what they did to us had in a long way added what we call quantum of composite value to their economy on a daily basis, even up till now. While it had a negative effect on our economy up to this day. Do you know that, like I said, we had the opportunity to do what they are doing now, but we did not do it. Why did we not do it? We were too comfortable. We had the mineral wealth. Do you know that we have we have the richest soil in the world? If you just throw a grain on the ground, it will grow. So we became too comfortable. We are not ambitious. We are not interested in expanding our coast. When it was time for us to go and conquer, we conquered for the sole purpose of just getting tribute, like I said. But at the end of the day, look at where we are today. And I will continue to disagree with anybody who said the Europeans are wicked. We are all wicked. Look at what our leaders are doing to us today. Are they generous to us?
Okay.
Are they being nice?
All right, so
hardly do any of our leaders have what I call proactive vision. They are not interested in legacy. They are only interested in now. And until we remove, divert our mind of this now syndrome, we will still continue to complain.
Okay.
You know, we have to do
Let
our
me pause
best.
you. I'll pause you there. Now, Professor Victor, now quickly, within the next 2 minutes now, I wanted to also try to establish what we are trying to do here, because it's like the proverbial adage that says that rather than blame the hawk for taking the chicks, you also need to blame the mother hen, I mean, for bringing the chicks out on such a very dangerous day. Now, it appears that the African society, we had a very loose, fragmented lifestyle. I mean, that made it very easy for the Europeans to come into us. They came in through trade. They influenced our trade life, and of course, even the language that we speak, they took it. I don't know, would you want to also allude to that conclusion?
Well, you know, they were a little bit advanced. And significantly, our people were enthused. They were interested in all these fine things, gunpowder, all these other things.
In their technology.
Yes, their technology, so to speak.
Yeah.
So they were carried away. And in the process, they neglected their ingenuity. They neglected their ingenuity.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We cannot say we don't have anything to give. If we had developed at our own pace, probably we may not be too far from where they are. But we left it and just followed them, hook, line, and sinker. For as long as what he called, he was talking about tribute, for as long as the Europeans were giving them gin, fine drinks, and all those mundane things, they were carried away. But these Europeans were they were mining our resources and taking away to their own country.
All right. So we quickly take a short pause now so that we get you the latest updates on the hour. And don't forget that the program is still Africa Discourse on Independent Television. When we return, we're going to be looking at the impacts of this Berlin Conference. I mean, even after 140 years, we'll see the impact on the continent of Africa and see how we can begin to ameliorate, some of these impacts that are so, discouraging, you may want to say, and that are so, negative on us as a people. Please stay tuned. All right, thank you one more time. The program is still right here on Independent Television, Africa Discourse, and we are looking at the Berlin Conference of the 1884 and of course 1885. It's been 140 years after that conference in Berlin, and of course we are looking at also to see the impacts that conference have had on us as a continent in Africa. Now, there is something that you also need to understand and gain from this discussion today is the fact that if you take a look at the map of Africa, now you see the territorial, geographical, boundaries of nations in Africa. Take, for example, you want to trace out Nigeria from the map of Africa. You can readily see the map of Nigeria from the map of Africa. Then you also want to take the map of Ghana from the map of Africa. You can easily trace that because of the line and all that. Now, it was this Berlin Conference that gave rise to all that. Now, what actually happened was that after the Europeans made up their mind, after they had their conference and all that, actually it took them another 25 years for them to begin to, implement the resolution that they reached at that conference. So they now have to segment African nations into various countries, because African nations by nations, they were so rich with natural resources. Take, for example, the Niger Delta area, that is the present day of Nigeria now. It was said that the Niger Delta area was, so rich in some particular natural resources. Hence, the European, just took a tiny line and mapped out that, and of course that became the map of Nigeria that you have today. Also, it happened in DRC. Of course, the issue of DRC was so, they were so interested in the DRC because DRC, Ab initio, have always had natural resources in thousands and all that. So what they also did was to take a map and just drew the map of DRC, that's the present day Democratic Republic of Congo. They drew around that, and of course, that's why you can easily trace out the map of DRC from the map of Africa. You know, it happened to all nations of Africa like that. It was the Berlin Conference that gave rise to the geographical representation of every and any country you see on the map of Africa today. Now, Derek Huanwo, you are still there. You know, this conference, you know, actually left us with some devastating impact. There's no doubt about that. Now, we'll talk about social impact, political impact, economic impact, and of course, impact on our natural resources that they plundered into. So, 140 years after, how do we begin to look at this impact, this negative impact that they've had on us? How do we begin to look at them so that we can begin to probably have a redress on this negative impacts?
Well, the most devastating of all the impacts is the social impact. But even before the effect of their social impact, or rather, the impact of the social impact wouldn't have been so much on us, if not that we weren't prepared at all for what was coming. That was why we were able to be assimilated, and we lost ourselves in the Western consciousness that still troubles us today. As I'm here now, I'm putting on a jacket, a suit jacket, which is a Western form of dressing. You know, it would have been better if I'm wearing native. So I'm not removing myself from this equation. But at the same time, our problem has always been leadership. 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 There are some areas you will go to. You will not be allowed to dress in certain traditional attire. You know, in some areas, you will not be able to say certain words which is in your native dialect. You know, there are curses, you know, that is laid upon anybody that does certain things, which is supposed to be things that will promote our culture. But these things, you are not allowed to do it. Like I said, are you aware that in some years ago, long time ago, maybe hundreds of years ago, the Benin indigene was not allowed to speak Benin language to a non-Benin indigene. It was as bad as that. But today we are begging people to embrace the Benin language. So I'm trying to say this to say that if we were really prepared, the social impact wouldn't have been much on us, because it was the same devastating effect that the colonial era brought to Africa that it took to China, India, and what have you. To the extent China was worse. They were exporting opium, hard drugs. You know, perhaps they already knew that the Chinese had a very strong consciousness in terms of their own culture, traditions, and ideology. So they wanted to destroy them with the use of drugs. When the leadership of the Chinese people came up, the communist leaders came up to say, hey, come on, you can't be doing this. You are destroying our people with opium. Please stop it. They resisted the Chinese leaders, and the war broke. They dealt a decisive blow to the Chinese people. And the opium trade continued, just to destabilize the Chinese people. But today, because of their resilience, they were able to build back themselves. They jettisoned the Western consciousness, and they embraced their own. And, you know, you can see that at the end of the day, they are better off for it. China is one of the strongest economies in the world. If you ask me, I'll say it's the strongest economy in the world. They have the largest foreign reserve. They have the strongest, you know, technology currently by way of growth rate of their technological, you know, advancement, and so on and so forth. So it is, the determination is on us. The impact of whatever the European colonization brought is because we were not ready for it. Until now, we are still not ready. Are you aware that a black man would prefer to do business with a Caucasian, the European, than to do business with a fellow black man.
All right, so there
Are you also aware that today, most of our mind, most of our query are being managed, are being run, are being owned by either the Chinese, the Indian, or the European? Whereas our governors and presidents should have made a policy, just like Ghana is doing a policy now, of local contents. You know, you cannot go to a country like China.
So that you don't take it all away. Now, Professor Victor, Derek Hwango, has explained the social impact of this Berlin conference. And of course, it is still something that we're still dealing with as Africans up to today. But let's look at the political impact too. Now, I understand that in our government in our elementary government class in school, we were told that before the Europeans came, even before the Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885, now Africa as a continent had a well-structured governmental system of taking the people and all that. But the Europeans came and they introduced the present-day democracy or parliamentary system of government that we practice, as it were, and all that. Now, even on that, we still have issues. Now, what is in the African, mindset that's ab initio? They were not able to recognize what should be best for them, because some persons have even argued that, hey, this democracy is not African. It's not the best form of government, and probably that's the reason why we're having one or two issues we're having on the continent.
We are looking at the political dimension.
The political impacts now.
You see, there's this, they call this one the policy of divide and rule. It was to balkanize Africa, so that they can completely assimilate. And when you assimilate people, they tend to lose their initiative. Absolutely. They won't even see anything that is right in what they are doing. So they now embraced the political culture of the Europeans. And they are not able to analyze it in detail. These Europeans will make some of them to be overlord. And they now have the perquisites of the office. So that's what our people, the few ones that were educated amongst them, they were living larger than life. And everybody aspire. If I go to school, I'll become this, I'll become that. They completely neglected their own form of government, as you explained earlier. The Benima will say, before the Europeans came, we were not wearing
we had our own system.
Yes, we were not wearing plantain leaves.
System of
we're not going about naked.
Yeah.
So all we needed to do was to evolve our own system of government. But as I said, they have so infiltrated our system, and you were looking at what is the mentality of the black people with regards to political emancipation. When there is dependency syndrome, there is a big problem. They made them to be dependent on them entirely. If somebody does that to you, then you have a problem. Before you can emancipate yourself, it will take a very long time. That's where, we embrace a system that we cannot run because it's not akin to our own culture. We have driven our own culture, political culture, way back. It has recessed. And we just embrace everything hook, line, and sinker. We have to go back. I'm not saying that everything about the political game of the Europeans are absolutely bad, but we have to interrogate it and use our own to look at it and come out with a better system.
In a way so that it can fit into our social, cultural lifestyle.
Yes, lifestyle. That's not what we are doing. We are just embracing everything like hook, line, and sinker. And that's a big problem for us.
Okay. All right, so Derek Unwango, now on the parts of natural resources, that seems to be a major talking points when we talk about the Berlin Conference. Now, even up to now, we're still suffering from the impacts. I mean, take for example Nigeria, amassed with lots of natural resources and all that. Let's talk about crude in the first place. Now, the average black man still believes that not until our resources are taken to the Western world, we cannot have the best of it. Now, how do we get away from all this mindset? Derek Wanwo.
I will continue to say leadership, leadership, leadership. There is a way the society, copy leadership. Remember when we had Adam Soshomole as governor, during his first tenure, everybody started wearing khaki just to imitate him because he was seen to be doing very well during his first tenure, So it's all about leadership. Once the leadership at the top starts doing the right thing, everybody, will file along. So we just need to, start thinking about our own people, not our pockets, our people. We should be more interested in leaving legacy, remarkable legacy, not how we will be able to enrich our immediate family. No, look at people like Patrice Lumumba, who tried to liberate Congo. Look at people like Kwame Nkrumah, who was a Pan-Africanist, who tried to advise the other African leaders that there is need for Africa to come up as a nation, so that other nations, other Africa will become regions. That it is in all of us working together that will be able to defeat the Western imperialists. But they all rejected him. They all wanted to be big fish in a very small stream. They didn't want Africa to be like a mighty ocean. So our mindset, the mindset of our leaders must have to change. They must wake up their ideas until we know that Africa is the only place for us. We have the best land. We have the best climate in the world. We have the best of everything in the world. Go and do your research. Initially, the Europeans didn't want to even come here for the purpose of extraction. They wanted to come and settle in Africa. But God helped us by making mosquito a plague. Anopheles mosquito made them sick with malaria and they were dying in their numbers. That was why they were not able to settle in Africa. And when they just started coming to Africa, they were decimating us, killing our people here and there. They always have a way of coming with cholera outbreak. 50% of the African population, were lost within the first 30 years after Berlin Conference. Go and do your research. But they found out that they could not settle in Africa. So they now resolved to do the colonialization for exploitation, extraction, destabilization, and imperialism. So we as a people, we are more evolved. We are the original people of this earth, of this planet. Mentally, we are better off than the white man. It's just that the white man has a savage mindset. They don't care what it takes for them to get what they want. They must get it at all costs. So we must begin to think outside the box to see how we'll be able to redeem ourselves and redeem our land from the white man. China had the same challenge. India had the same challenge. Even the Europeans before now had the challenge we're having now in the hands of the Mongolian Empire. They destroyed Europe. They took over their land. They treated them like slaves. But today they were able to, come out from those their slumber, wake up from their slumber.
Part there. Now, Professor,
thank you.
Finally, the issue of natural resources seems to be a major issue in Africa. Now, as we speak now, DRC has been in turmoil, and this Western interest, has been fingered in the war, in the crisis in the DRC. But thank God that in some parts of Africa, we're beginning to see leadership trying to give a redirection that, hey, let's start looking inward. I mean, take for example in Nigeria, where we're beginning to see refineries, working, even if we're still asking questions in that direction. And of course, we are also beginning to see some, extractive industries are picking up in Nigeria, in parts of Africa. Now, I think what we really need to do to really reposition that ability to really look inward as a continent that, hey, we can do these things here. Let us not allow these resources to go out anymore.
Well, we can do it. We have to have that we can do spirit. And it boils down to the leadership is very crucial. Leadership is very crucial. It's the leadership that gives direction to the people, as one who observed. Now, how do you breed your leaders? That is another thing. You will see our political system, they can throw up any person to become a leader. Even the leader that is not prepared at all, he gets there and starts to gamble because he has surplus resources. If we have a system that trains a leader, we'll now come back to a good education system that will train people. If you see the mentality of the average youth in the country, it calls for concern. We are just looking for what to grab, that's all. Nobody is thinking of how to invent something that will even generate more money than the money that they expect that should be stolen. You are teaching students, they are not interested at all. You pass them, you just let them go, let them go, let them go. They write something for you, master's, PhD, you will hold your head. What kind of, how do we go from here? How are we going to move from this? You see, and their likes are already in the system. The people who are beneficiaries, they are now back to the system. So it will continue unabated. So, and under such circumstances, you cannot bring good leadership. If the ivory towers, majority of them are corrupted. You heard that, how a student can bite a lecturer, and all that. And the lecturers are protecting their heads. You also heard what happened in Uniben when they finished they say sign out also. They held the community hostage. So if we don't take good steps to re-engineer our social and political system, we are in the quagmire. We are going to remain in the quagmire.
All right, thank you. Now, Derek Uhwango, I'm going to give you 20 seconds, 30 seconds to quickly wrap it up. Quickly.
Well, I will continue to advise our political class, our leaders, no matter who you are, if you were corrupt, leadership is an opportunity for you to make a remarkable legacy that will live beyond you and your children. So you should be more interested in building a good legacy for yourself so that even when you are gone, you continue to live on. So leadership must continue to show the people the way, the right way to follow. And we must support local content. Instead of supporting the Chinese people out there, we must support our own people to try. Let me also thank the federal government for allowing Dangote refinery, to come to stay. From Dangote refinery, you now see that the pressure on the Naira is beginning to reduce. So to the extent that Dangote is now exporting petroleum products outside the shores of Nigeria. So kudos to the federal government. They need to build industry and sustain it here in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
All right, so once a very big thank you to Derek Uhwango, and also a very big thank you, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today, Africa Discourse. Now, some of the facts of fire that you must understand is that the Berlin Conference was a major gathering of major European powers to formalize claims to territory in Africa. It was also aimed at partitioning. Please, I want you to underline that word, partitioning the present-day Africa. I tried to illustrate that during the course of the program, how You have various countries, lined up within territorial map and all that. So it was the Berlin Conference that partitioned Africa into parts so as to divide because of resources among the Western countries at the expense of the African people. Then 14 countries were represented at the time at that Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885. The countries are Austria, Hungary, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal, Russia, Spain, Sweden, Norway, Turkey, and of course the United States of America. Then we are also told that under the support from the British and of course the initiative of the Portugal and one man, one character that will never be forgotten, Otto von Bismarck, the Chancellor of Germany then called 13, 14 other nations that put together this conference. And since then, it's been 140 years since that conference was held in Berlin, in the present day Germany. And it's still something that we are still talking about because it has left so much devastating impact on the continent of Africa. Social impact, negative impact, economic negative impact, and even negative political impact that you may want to say. So until we come together as a continent, we cannot fight the impact of this Berlin Conference. That's just what it shows. All right, so until same time and next week, that will bring you another interesting topic on this program, Africa Discourse. My name is Evan Sunogugi. Goodbye, and God bless you.